Previously, he co-founded Sidekicks, a unique social search engine, and he served as the VP Biz Dev and Marketing. And prior to that, Ari co-founded Nomadigo, a mobile, location-based social networking service for consumers, where he was responsible for creating the company's exit to OmniSky for $40 million in 2001. In addition to his internet and telecom experience, Ari has provided business consulting in the areas of capital equipment, optics, biotech, medical, and enterprise software. Ari serves in the IDF spokesperson's office as an international press liaison officer, and he received his executive MBA from the Kellogg School of Management in 2004. Take it away, Ari.
Somebody did some homework. Okay, excuse me, can everybody hear me? How many of you guys here are currently working for somebody else? Raise your hand. How many of you guys have already started your own company? Wow, okay. How many of you guys are in consumer? Half and half. And how many of you guys are in enterprise? And how many of you guys are doing something else? What are you doing?
It's a hardware product, which is eventually for consumers, but more for medical uses early on. So
okay, medical. You?
I'm
he's just with me.
Okay. Anyone else doing something different?
I should do something that requires both customers and
okay. All right. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today is the fact that most Israeli startups are very, very focused on developing a product. That's the first thing that they want to do. They want to get their idea to, build it, now take it to market. But the thing that you forget when you're building a product is that you're in a forest. And if that tree falls in the forest, nobody knows it happened. So before you even start building your product, you should actually go to the market and start talking to people and getting feedback and get inputs about what you're building before you even start. Let's start with that piece before we go forward. From here, let's talk about what you need to do. When I got up here, what was the first thing that I did? I asked questions, exactly. I wanted to find out who was in the room. Who is the audience that I'm talking to? I want to learn a little bit more about you, because it's going to help me as I go forward with the presentation to know who am I talking to. If I'd had a bunch of guys picking up their hands and saying that they're in the medical profession, then I would know I need to tailor my presentation to them. But because I have so many people in enterprise software, well, that gives me an idea that really I should be focusing on that and a little bit on consumer too. The next thing that we're going to be talking about is how do we get the message out to the people? How do people know about the product we're developing? How do we make sure we get our message to them? And finally, what's the path that we need to take to get there? And most importantly, how do you save your most valuable asset? Can somebody tell me what that is? Very good. What? So the first thing you need to do is you want to speak to people. Before you spend $1 on R&D, before you go out and raise $1 from an investor, talk to your market. Understand who they are. You say, well, I'm in Israel. I'm not in the United States. Well, guess what? Israel is a very diverse place. And thank God you can find people here who are experts in a lot of things. Does that mean you shouldn't take a credit card, swipe it, and go over to the States if you're doing consumer-based something or other? No. If you're doing something that's going to rely on Facebook's platform, you really should talk to the people at Facebook first. Make sure that what you want to do isn't something that they're going to block you from doing. Make sure that it's possible before you spend hours developing, working, R&D, finance, etc. Learn a little bit first. Use investors. Investors have a lot of knowledge. They know about a lot of things because they're in the valley and they're connected to many different companies and they can put you in touch with the right people. Before you start going to them to raise money and to raise capital, Go to them and say, hey, I've just got an idea. I don't need money right now. I just want to talk to you. Can you give me 15 minutes? Don't ask them for an hour. If they're interested, they'll give you an hour. But take 15 minutes and get their initial feedback. Come up to them at an event like this. Try to get them at the side after they've answered everyone else's question, and then speak to them just for a short bit of time and say, what do you think? Who should I talk to in the industry? Once you've done that, you've had a little bit of feedback from people in the industry, or if you have an idea for college students, and you've interviewed 30, 50, 100 college students about your idea and gotten feedback about it, then maybe you're ready to start taking the next steps to go forward about packaging your product. The next thing that we want to talk about is packaging your product. Getting the message out to people. One of the things that we find is that in Israel, most startup companies want to tell you everything. He spoke about, how Israeli startups, they just, spend 45 minutes just doing a one-man pitch. That's not the way to do it. Because a lot of things can be lost, not just in translation, which is bad enough, but a lot of things just aren't clear. How many of you guys know what this is? What does it say? No. Can somebody tell me what that means? One person. Huh? It's what your wife says. Okay. Somebody else have an idea what it means?
No, not now.
Not now? What else does it mean? Maybe? You're a salesperson?
No, if it was a salesperson, then it means yes.
Okay. There is a different interpretation to words, even in the same language. And even if it's one word, and it's a simple word, that your wife would understand and say, hey, what's up? You should understand this. This is simple, right? How many of you have girlfriends that told you no? Exactly. But yet, for some reason, and especially for Israelis, this word doesn't, we don't get it, right? Okay. That's part of the secret to our success, by the way. But it also is something you guys have to internalize and understand. How about this word?
That's the initial for Israel.
Initial for Israel, right? One of the issues that we have as entrepreneurs is the fact that we know everything. We do. We're perfect, right? That's why we have the balls to get up there and build our company. The problem is that the guy on the other side of the table, he's seen a million guys just like him, with the same confidence, the same balls, all coming into his office, ready just to show him exactly how the world's going to be run. What's the problem with that? Who here is a salesperson? Can you tell me what's the problem with that as a salesperson?
You're looking at the world through your own eyes and not through your customers.
Exactly. Can somebody repeat that? Can the whole room repeat that together at once? Okay? When you're selling something to somebody else, it's not about you. It's about them. And it's about what they want and what they need. If you don't have that right from the beginning, it's not going to work. You can talk yourself till you're blue in the face. So as he said, it's about listening. Take a few minutes. Make your initial pitch. Now get feedback. When they tell you no, ask why. Don't explain to them why they're wrong or why they don't understand. They just might see things a little differently than you do. And that's okay. Take the opportunity to learn from them. The beauty about I and ego is that it gets you in the door. The problem with it is that it tends to work as a steamroller that just mows everyone else down. And that's not what you want to do by the time you leave the meeting. You want him to be wanting to call you back. And if you can't do that, you're not going to get very far. Now we're going to try to run something here. Sometimes we have an issue with it. Other times it works. So I hope you guys will wish me luck.
Instrument that would not only provide inverse reactive current for use in unilateral phase detractors, but would also be capable of automatically synchronizing cardinal gram meters. Such an instrument comprised of Dodge gears and bearings, Reliance electric motors, Allen Bradley controls, and all monitored by Rockwell software is Rockwell Automation's Retroencabulator. Now basically, the only new principle involved is that instead of power being generated by the relative motion of conductors and fluxes, It's produced by the modial interaction of magnetoreluctance and capacitive diractance. The original machine had a base plate of prefamulated amulite surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing in such a way that the two spurving bearings were in a direct line with a panometric fan. The lineup consisted simply of 6 hydrocoptic Marsal vanes, so fitted to the ambifacient lunar wane shaft that side fumbling was effectively prevented. The main winding was of the normal Lotus-O deltoid type placed in panendermic semi-boloid slots of the stator. Every 7th conductor being connected by a non-reversible tremie pipe to the differential girdle spring on the up end of the gram meters. Moreover, whenever fluorescent score motion is required, it may also be employed in conjunction with a drawn reciprocation dingle arm to reduce sinusoidal depleneration. The retroencabulator has now reached a high level of development, and it's being successfully used in the operation of Milford trunnions. It's available soon, wherever Rockwell Automation products are sold.
Is he for I?
He's good, right?
Yeah, he's great.
He's great, right? Okay, how many of you guys understood everything he was talking about? We have 2, right? 3? Very good. You guys are all engineers, right? No, you're not.
We're self.
You're self-made. There you go. Okay, beautifully said. All right, this is the way you guys sound when you pitch a product. Let that sink in. This is what the other guy hears. You need to tone down what you're talking and what you're saying, even to the most sophisticated VC. Because what you just saw was a joke. That wasn't for a real product. Okay? This is one of the most well-known memes in the tech industry that's out there. It's fantastic. And it tells you exactly what you shouldn't do. It's a brilliant presentation. It's well done. It's, everything's scripted right? Great salesperson in there. This is exactly what you don't want to do. Now let's try to look at somebody else and see what they've done.
Hi Kickstarter, my name is Aaron. This is my smartphone, and this is my Pebble. Pebble is a watch that you can customize. It runs a lot of cool and useful apps, and connects wirelessly by Bluetooth to your iPhone or Android smartphone. This is our dream team. It started with a prototype built from cell phone parts. That led us to our first commercial product, the Impulse smartwatch for BlackBerry. The #1 question we received was, when will the watch work with my iPhone? Well, we're proud to say that we can finally answer that question. This is Pebble. It's the only watch that works perfectly with iPhone and Android smartphones. Pebble is much smaller and lighter than anything else that it has a high-resolution e-paper display that looks sharp and readable even outside under direct sunlight. Pebble comes in several different colors: Arctic white, jet black, cherry red, and a 4th color that you could vote on as a backer of a color option. We're really excited about how you can run apps on Pebble. If you cycle, you can use Pebble as a bike computer. The GPS on your phone provides accurate data, letting you view stats like average speed, elapsed time, and distance traveled. If you run with your smartphone, you can use Pebble to easily control your music and monitor your pace and distance. You can even see extraordinarily important messages right on your wrist. It's easy to install new apps on your Pebble. Just browse the Watch App Store on your phone and click Install. Around the house, Pebble makes it easy to see who's calling while your hands are full. You can also control most smartphone music apps like iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, Google Music, and more right from your wrist. These apps are just the start. For the more adventurous, we're launching an open SDK so anyone can build apps for Pebble. These apps can receive data and transmit data to the internet. Pebble has a built-in accelerometer, a vibrating motor, powerful microprocessor, Bluetooth, and a beautiful e-paper display. The battery keeps Pebble running for over 7 days. So that's Pebble. We finished the design, and we're just about to start production. but we need help to get Pebble onto your list. We hope you'll join us. Thanks.
How many of you guys understood that? Yeah, that's what I thought. What did you notice about the differences between the way he spoke and the way the other person spoke?
Use case.
Say-
Use case.
Say it again?
They're giving use case. You can see easier to use.
He gave really clear use cases. What else was different? Slower. Okay? Especially for those of you that have an accent. When you're talking to somebody else, take your time. Right now I'm lucky. I get to speak in English. When I have to do this in Hebrew, I drop the speed. Yes?
The decision makers that are the gatekeepers of the money are not necessarily as technical as the engineers that design the product. And you need to bring down the level of your discussion to a more, to a less technical audience.
Yes. That's the point. Okay. So the good news about the startup business is that the cost of producing technology is going down. That's great. But the cost of creating the marketing materials that you need to get out to go to the market for the first time, well, that's not necessarily going down quite as quickly, at least not for the early stages. Because the expectations of what your materials need to look like and what you need to have when you get out the door tend to go up. This is all the more true the more consumer focused you are. So you saw for Kickstarter, the video that was produced. Does anyone know how much they raised for Kickstarter?
All over the roof.
$10.25 million. Now, I need to be specific. That wasn't money they raised. That was revenue in their first year.
Pre-purchase.
Pre-purchased. Do you guys understand what that means? It means you don't give anything away to anybody else. He doesn't get a piece of your company. Okay? You just got $10 million, you put it in your pocket. Yes, you have obligations. Yes, you have things that you have to do. Yes, it's not quite so simple.
And they were turned down by VCs and by Y Combinator.
Can you say that again?
They were turned down by VCs and by Y Combinator.
An accelerator turned them down because they didn't want to touch hardware. The VCs were like, and this was an experienced team. They'd already built a watch. They'd already sold it. They'd already brought it to market. And they were told no by the VC community. And yet, they believed in themselves enough, and they figured out a creative way to try to go about bringing their product to market. And they were a good team. They worked hard, and they put together the right materials. They contacted the right people in the press. They told their story well. And guess what? It worked. So many times people are afraid of, oh, it costs me money to go out and produce these marketing materials. I'll do it myself, right? Because there's a lot of things that you need. Aside from, maybe a movie, maybe you don't need a movie. That's something that we can debate. But you need to have an executive summary. And it needs to be top-notch. It can't be something that's written with gibberish, okay? If you're not a native English speaker, find somebody who is. And if it's just a friend and they review it for you, you're going to be a lot better off. But if you want to be one step better, get a copywriter to write it for you. Because they're going to take out all the technical terms, they're going to make it sound good, they're going to make it sound solid, and when you go out with your executive summary to the market and you send it to somebody, it'll catch their eye and they'll actually read it. So when you come to the meeting, they're already going to know something about you. As opposed to the fact that they're just taking the meeting because Moshe bikesh ממני טובה, זה נעשה כאילו כך, נכון? A product brochure. That doesn't mean creating something in Word. That means using Publisher or using something a little bit more sophisticated to create something that actually looks nice. That looks like you hired a graphic artist to do it. And if you can, hire a graphic artist to do it. Okay? We're talking about 500 shekels, 1,000 shekels, 2,000 shekels. We're not talking about a lot of money. You can put this on your credit card. That's what you have them for. And you're an entrepreneur. You're going to have to get used to doing that. Your visuals. You need to have a good presentation. Okay, I totally agree with Shani. You know what? 45 slides, way too much. 10 slides, Good slides, really strong slides. Get someone to design them for you if you don't know how to do it yourself. How many words have you seen on my presentation so far? Yeah, exactly. 2. I'm doing the talking. Listen to me. I don't want you reading things off my slides. If you're putting down a whole Megillah on the slides, that's a recipe for failure. Because now, instead of listening to you, he's going to be trying to read what you wrote on your slides and find your mistake. And when he finds your mistake, he's going to point it out to you. And now what do you have to do? You have to explain why it's not a mistake, and you have to correct him, and now you've ruined the whole dynamic. Okay? You just killed it, and not in a good way. The final thing that you're going to need is financials, case study, value calculator, and hopefully a reference customer. Somebody that you can bring to the table and you can say, hey, this guy, he uses my product, he loves it. If you can show me that, and it's a competitor of mine, that's great. If you don't have these materials ready from the beginning, don't go to market. Don't go talk to an investor. Because what's going to happen? You're going to get them all psyched up, and they're going to love it because you got a great movie. You did a kick-ass job on the movie. And you had the executive summary, you sent it in to him, and he took the meeting, and you go and you talk to him. And then what happens? He's going to ask you for this stuff. And when he asks you for this stuff, you have to now go and produce it. How long is it going to take you to produce all that material that I just showed you? And what happens?
To lose the contract.
The deal gets cold. Something else comes into his office, it's hot, it's exciting, it's new. Okay, he doesn't have time. He's not going to remember. You had one shot, you got in the door, you got to jump on it with everything you got. Don't let the deal go cold. If you did your homework before and you were ready and you knew what he was going to ask for, then when he asked for it, boom, you put it on the table. You give it to him. So the question is, who do we talk to? All right? Who do you go to speak to first? So I said, speak to customers. How many customers, who, etc. It depends on what your business is. Talking to a lot, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. All these things you said, because previously you said talk to customers even before you even start, and talk to investors. But even before you start, you should have all these.
So no, there's two stages here, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Thank you. The first stage is before you're ready to go and start pitching to a customer, or before you start going to pitch to Shani. Okay? Before you do that stuff, you need to have this material ready. When you're going to speak to Shani to say, hey, Shani, I've got an idea. I want you to help me validate it. Who else can you recommend that I speak to? You don't have to have these materials ready. What you need to have is maybe an executive summary. Maybe not even that. You need to have just one really solid email that explains what you want to do. You need to have a business card because you want him to be able to be in touch with you. And you want him to understand that you've taken the job at least that serious, that yes, you have a card. Even though people don't keep the cards and they don't use them, etc., it's more a psychological issue than anything else. But have a card with your company name on it. Maybe you're going to change the name. Maybe you're going to change lots of things. But you have a name, you have an email address. You know, you invested the $30 in buying a domain and paying for a server that you can actually put your name on the domain. It shows that you're serious, even if you don't have a company. But at least you invested the minimal stuff that you need to do. But the other side is going to look across the table and say, he's going in the right direction. He's serious about what he's doing. So finding the right people to talk to takes time and money. It doesn't take that much time, and it doesn't take that much money. But it's important to do it first. So I started talking about for enterprise customers. If you're doing something in banking, there are plenty of CIOs in Israel that you can talk to in the banking industry. And you know what? They might even make time for you. Why? Because Israel is a matrix-oriented society. And this is one of the magic things about Israel. There's only 2 degrees of separation between you and anyone else in this country. You have a friend who has a friend who can connect you to whoever you need to get to. And in the United States, that's maybe 5 degrees. And if it's outside, then maybe it's 6 degrees. But here in Israel, only 2. So whatever knowledge you need to acquire, whatever validation you need to get, at least in the first stage, you can get it here. You can go talk to somebody. And you should talk to a few people, not just one, because each one is going to give you a different input. And talk to them about your idea. Now a lot of people say, oh, what if they copy my idea? Do you think the CIO of the bank has time to copy your idea? He's got too many other things. And you know what? How many people know Facebook? How many people know the 200 startups that were doing what Facebook did before Facebook was around? Yeah, 200. And it was just in the United States alone. And guess what? Those 200 startups, you know MySpace, you know Friendster, maybe. But that's it.
MSN.
MSN has a social network?
Had.
My point. Okay? If you're doing something with consumers, you want to do something with parents, go talk to 30 parents. Go talk to them. You want to do something with students at a university, go talk to students. You want to do something for kids, go talk to kids. It's not that hard. Go ahead.
Do you to talk or to get surveys and more solid stuff?
It's a good question. In my opinion, for an early stage startup, talking is enough. You're not at a stage, because all you want to do right now is just make sure that you're not crazy. Okay? You want to make sure that you're not the guy who spends 2 years trying to create a platform for debating. Because that's 2 years of your life that you could have been doing something better, that you could have increased your chances of success. So for now, let's just talk. Let's just have a conversation. Listen. Get their feedback. Afterwards, once you've got a real company and you've scaled up, then you need to start using surveys, and you need to start getting feedback from a hell of a lot more than just 30 people. But for right now, before you do anything else, let's just talk to some people. Let's get an idea. Oh, one last thing. You want to do something with an enterprise customer or somebody like that, okay? If you haven't had experience in that space yourself personally, you might want to reconsider going that direction. Or get somebody else on your team who does have the industry-specific knowledge. Would you hire a guy who says something he's going to do something in banking if he has no banking experience?
No, banking industry definitely not. There are some industries where I think there's an advantage to having someone who's not domain expert in that industry. But banking industry definitely is not one. Banking, payment, social networks, definitely.
Okay. What's an example of one that you would say, you know what, being an external person, being not from the industry is good?
I'm replicating a little bit, but Airbnb, I mean, there's a reason why no one from the hospitality industry thought about Airbnb. Because they're all spending their time in fancy hotels. None of them ever, went to a city and was trying to find a room for $40. So.
Exactly. And the difference is that guess what? You're competing with the industry. You're not trying to become part of it. And so as a competitor, as someone who's an outsider, you have a different approach on how to turn around and take and change the entire market, the entire approach. So how do people hear about you? How do you make sure that when that tree falls in the forest, people know about it? How many of you are engineers again? Let's see those hands. Okay. Did you guys see that? How many of you engineers, keep your hands up. Okay. Now I want to see how many of you engineers have actually sold something. Put your hands down. Okay. So out of all those guys who are engineers, I've got about 4 salespeople in the room. So if you're not a salesperson, and you don't know how to go out and pitch, and you don't know how to go out and open up those doors, maybe you want to consider bringing a salesperson or somebody who has a marketing orientation on, either as a partner or a hired gun. Doesn't matter how you get them. But you should have them there, because they bring a different skill set to the table. You spent 8, 9 years becoming where you are and getting to the point where you are as an engineer, working, getting experience. Sales guy, a good sales guy, he's done the same thing. And it's a completely different skill set. Marketing. How many of you guys have run an advertising campaign? That's actually way better than normal. Okay, most of the time I ask that question and people are like, does AdWords count? Marketing is a whole other science, and it's not the same thing as sales. But what do most Israeli startups do? They hire a VP sales and marketing. Now, when you look at the budget breakdown of an Israeli startup, in the early stage, beginning stage, mid stage, what do you see? 90% of the budget is for? How much of the budget is for sales?
The rest.
That's a good scenario. The remaining 10% is broken down between general administration, sales, and marketing. The United States, 30% sales, 30% marketing, 30% R&D, 10% G&A. Would you agree? Now, it's no question, it's no surprise, I guess I should say, that in Israel, when we have startups, we actually build shit that works. We have a startup graveyard here of tons of things that people actually built and actually worked. The problem is, they didn't build them for any market, or they didn't really get to market, and so the company died. Whereas in the United States, what happens? You have a bunch of guys that have a really good idea, but they don't really know how to build it right. And so they kind of struggle through their ideas, and nothing really happens, and that's why the company dies. It's very rare that a company in the United States gets to the same level of development and technology with their idea, and they can't do at least something, at least get some traction, at least get some revenue. But here in Israel, we have tons of startups that never get to the revenue stage. How many of you guys were in the Air Force? Okay. Were any of you guys pilots? No. How many of you guys were in tanks? Nobody in tanks. Damn, I blew it on this one. Normally when I ask this question, I have a few guys who have done the Air Force, I've got a few guys who are in tanks, something. And I asked them, you know, I'm a pretty adventurous guy. I kite surf, I motorcycle, I have a Jeep. What's the big deal about driving a tank or flying a plane? Give me the keys, let me take it out for a spin, right? What's the problem? How many of you guys, if you guys had your own tank or your own plane, would give it to you? Yeah, I didn't think so. So wait a second. On the one hand, we understand that it takes time to develop an expertise. Even in something as simple as driving a tank, which isn't necessarily rocket science. It's not as hard as the stuff you guys have had to learn as engineers, right? That's why they allowed you to drive a tank when you were 18. Or fly a plane when you were 18, right? But yet, people believe, because they're engineers, that they can do sales and marketing. And they believe they can do it well.
And finance as well.
Oh, and finance, yes, absolutely. Does this make sense? So, why try to do something that you know nothing about? And risk your company's future on it? Why wouldn't you take and say, wait a second, I'm going to spend a little bit of money, more than 10%, on setting it aside for these other areas of expertise, which are just as important, if not more important, than the R&D. So now I'm going to start touching on the sales and marketing aspects, and I'm going to start doing something dangerous. I'm going to actually try to give you some of the tools that you need to do some of the sales and marketing by yourselves. Hopefully, you'll be smart enough to actually go out and get somebody else's help and bring somebody else into the equation who can do it better. But at least you'll have an idea about what needs to be done. So what's inside sales? Can somebody tell me? Why don't you give me?
Inside sales?
Yeah.
So people spending the time over the phone trying to get leads.
Trying to get leads. Who can tell me what a sales process is? Okay. Sales process.
Lead generation,
Okay.
quantifying the lead,
Okay.
finding the customer's needs, proposing the sale. And I left that up.
But that was great. Notice there was only one person in the room who was able to do that. I'm sure there are other people who could have. But
That's what we were doing.
exactly. All right, but that's the point. Okay. Inside sales, which is the way today most software startups are doing their sales, or at least the enterprise ones are doing their sales, is key to reduce your costs and expenses related to selling. Getting on a plane and flying to California costs money. The time that you're spending away from your business costs money. Hiring a salesperson, having them do these things for you, costs money. If you're able to develop a sales strategy that enables you to do all this without traveling, you can save a tremendous amount of money. But in order to do that, you need to be able to build trust with the client without them seeing and meeting the salesperson. How do you do that? Do you keep your sales and marketing as the same person, or do you split them? So the first thing you need to do when you do sales is to have an effective marketing strategy. You have to understand how you're going to break it down. And one of the things that I love about doing business in Israel, notice the sarcasm, is that Israelis tend to say, אני צריך איש מכירות שיביא לי כסף, אני לא צריך איש שיווק שיבזבז לי אותו. How many of you guys have heard that? I need a salesperson who's going to make me money, not a marketing person who's going to spend it. You have to understand that marketing is an investment. It's an investment in building trust with your clients. Because without trust, they're not going to buy from you. Without believing that you can actually deliver their product, they're not going to give you money. The guy walks up to you on the street, asks you for $100. What do you say?
No thanks.
You're walking into somebody's office and you're asking them for $1 million. What do you expect them to say? So the first thing that you can do is you can create a good website, a good video. Because what's the great thing about videos? They're salespeople that work 24/7. They work when the client wants to see them, and not when you're available. And they can get a basic idea, a high-level understanding of what it is you do. And you can send a link in an email. And so when they get the email, they can take a look at it. So personally, I like videos. I like salespeople. And not the retro and tabulator, because that sucks. The idea of having a good website is that the website serves as your home for gathering your leads. All the activity that you do in marketing, the cards that you pass out, everything else, all today leads back to a website. And there's something called a touchless sale, which is great if you're doing something that's not too expensive. And it doesn't take a lot of decision-making capability. And that means you don't have to hire salespeople in order to do it. It's all marketing. But not everything fits that shablul, that framework. Okay? So you use the website as a means of gathering the leads, a means of gathering people's contact details, a means of getting their information so you can follow up with them. You put all your tools there, make them easy for people to find. If you're going to give somebody something, it's okay to ask for something in return. So if you're giving out a white paper, if you're giving out additional information about the company, it's okay for you to ask for their email address so that you can get in contact. You need to be able to generate traffic to that site. You need to be able to get people to go there. How do you get people to go to your site? How do you get people to want to come to you? Well, this audience happens to be pretty mixed. Normally I'm speaking to a room full of guys. So the next picture is for them. What does it say on a shirt?
Are you interested?
Say it again?
Are you interested?
Are you interested? Okay. Well, it's pretty easy for a guy to say yes to that, right? There you go. Yeah, just one yeah. Normally I hear a whole room. Okay? Your startup needs to be that sexy. You need to be able to put yourself out there that anyone who looks at anything that you're doing says, yeah. Okay, I want to take the next step. Because all she says is, are you interested? Okay, she makes it really easy for the guy to approach her. She's not all standoffish and everything like that, right? Look at her pose, look at everything about her. Any guy has the confidence to walk up and say, hi, I'm Art. Right? Engineers want to walk up and say hi to her? This is what most Israeli startups look like. Would you buy from that person? How do you get people to know about you? You write. You use PR. You use the media. You use the tools that are out there and available to you to get your message out so people hear about you. You can start a blog. You can comment on other people's blogs. You can get TechCrunch to post about you.
When did you start doing that?
3 o'clock in the morning.
No,
we're
no,
doing
sorry.
anything else.
No, my point is when you start a process, at which stage? When you have the product already before?
So the first question is, when is your product ready? All right? He's going to tell you, and I'm going to agree with him, do what we call the minimum viable product first. Do something that's small, that proves what you want to do, proves your concept, and take that and go to market with it. Now is when you want everyone to hear about it. Before that, you want to let people know about what you're doing so that you can try to see, engage the market response. Are you going the right direction? You want to start talking to people. You want to start approaching companies that are potential customers and get their feedback. So the question of when you start investing heavily in marketing, really heavily in marketing, really needs to relate to when you have something that you think you can give back. One of the things that a lot of consumer-focused startups, or mainly consumer-focused startups I see in Israel do that is a disastrous mistake in my opinion, and VCs might argue with me, but this is my personal opinion, is they go to the market and they say, you know what, I have this idea and I'm going to buy traffic. I'm going to get people to come to my site and I'm going to pay money to get them to walk in my door. If you're paying money to get customers and you have no way of collecting money in exchange, I don't know how viable a strategy that is in the early stage of the startup's life cycle. I think there are more effective means for you to spend your advertising dollars in getting traffic and in getting people into your site than spending it on AdWords or spending it on banners or something like that. I think a better strategy is to spend the money on PR and get a different type of traction. Get people who are early adopters, people who will comment, people who can give you some type of value back, some type of feedback, rather than just random traffic that's out there. But that's my opinion, and other people would argue with me, and they're entitled to theirs as well.
Can I comment? So first of all, when do you do that? Once you develop a certain product, a certain prototype, don't do that. Go to your friends, find 200 people that are willing to try your product, assuming this is a consumer one, if this is an enterprise one, or find a CIO that will give you some feedback. Because again, your first product is not necessarily providing enough value proposition for your customers. So, do a couple of iterations, try it out with a couple of people, get some feedback, fine-tune your product, etc. Once you feel that there's enough value that you're offering to your customers and you're pretty much there, then that's the point where you can try and get mass customers. But don't do that before, first version that you launch your product, you just go and try to get 100,000 customers.
Start with one.
Start with 1, start with 10, 20, 100, and then scale from there. Don't try to just skip a step.
What you necessarily have to get this 10 first.
Depends on your product. Depends on your product. Depends on what you're doing.
No, marketing-wise.
Marketing-wise, you're going to need something to put in front of them. You're going to need a website. And you're going to need something that explains what you're doing. Oh, wait a second. When I did my first company, I went into Orange. And I talked to, I'm not going to say his name, I talked to one of the senior VPs there, and he said, yes, we work with startups, and we help startups, and if you want us to work with you, you need to give us 20% of your company, and then we'll consider working with you, in a very typical Israeli fashion. And I looked at this guy and I said, 20% of my company? No, it's not a good deal for me. And then I turned around and I went and did a deal with Telephone with Cellcom. And then he was coming running back to me on all fours saying, Mikey, what about me? I don't want you to do something that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make good business sense. But in terms of being able to build your solution, the conversation that I had with him helped me understand that the way in which we were approaching the market put too much power in his hands. I needed to get a box initially inside their data center. It was a location-based services startup. Back then, you needed to be able to tie into the data center in order to get into work. After talking to him and seeing his attitude and his approach, I learned something. I learned that if I were to rely on them, it would take me 18 months, 36 months to close a deal. My startup would never live that long. So I did the typical Israeli thing, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to use them. I'm not going to need to do it their way. I'm going to take a bunch of, at the time it was Palm Pilots, I'm going to take a bunch of Palm Pilots hooked to a wireless modem, a Novotel wireless modem, and I'm going to run up and down the country, and I'm going to map every cell tower in the country. And I'm going to understand where every cell tower in the country is. I hired 5 college students to do it. Anyone have a guess what my total cost was for mapping the country's cell towers? Less than $2,000. Less than $2,000. I had it done in under 2 months. Everything. And now, when I walked back into Cellcom's office, I was a little bit smarter. I said, well, here's what we want to do, and here's how the solution works. And we don't need to tie into your data center because we're running everything. There was no term SaaS at the time. We actually built a SaaS solution back then. Okay? We're running everything in the cloud. There was no cloud term then. But you understand what we were doing. We were running everything on the internet. Okay? And we basically bypassed everybody. And the initial reaction I got from every single telco in Europe, in Japan, in the United States, and of course in Israel was, hey, you can't do that. That's our proprietary data. And then I explained to them, well, not exactly, and here's why. And the guy looks at me, and the first call that they made after I left the office was to the legal department. And the legal department says to them, actually? And then I'm getting a call back because now the negotiation is about, at that time, the situation is different today, what placement do I get on the handset? Where do they put me? And if they get exclusivity or not. That's a much better negotiating position to be in, isn't it? And it's okay that I didn't make money from Cellcom, or that I didn't make money from Pebble. Because I have reference customers that are testing my product that will let me know whether or not I can actually do this, and what I need to do in order to correct it. But I didn't give away 20% of the company. What does it mean to sell? You're not selling to one person if you're selling into the enterprise, and you're not selling to one person if you're selling to a business. It's not just one guy who makes a decision. You might have one person that you're contacting and in touch with, but you've got a lot of other people that you need to convince. And if the materials that you've prepared beforehand, and if you don't know what you need to tell each one of these guys every step of the way, you're going to blow it. Because the CTO is going to say, oh, we can't allow that in our data center. The financial guy is going to say, oh, that's not viable for the long term. You need to understand the answers that each one of these people is going to give you. You need to be able to tell them what they want to hear. And that means you've got to listen to each one of them beforehand. So if you're selling a product, you need to know who the decision makers are going to be at each step of the way. And you have to convince all of them. Because any of these guys can say no. In the VC firm, do you make a decision by yourself? Who do you have to convince?
My partners.
Okay? All the partners need to feel good about you. All the people in the sales, when you're selling, they need to feel good about your product and about you. And if you're not able to convince them, it's not going to go forward. It's not going to happen. So we've talked about marketing a little bit. Now we're going to move a little bit more towards sales. Selling, for many years, was about everybody's leaving. Selling for many years was about, the fast-talking salesman, right? You had a guy that went door to door, and he pitched a product, he dumped dirt on your floor, and they cleaned it up with the vacuum cleaner and proved to you what a great solution he had. If somebody dumped dirt on your floor today, what would you do to him?
Keep him up.
Right? It's not going to happen today. These techniques don't work anymore. Because today we have what we call an educated consumer. Consumers can look at something, they can understand it, they're sophisticated, they've got access to the ability to research and make decisions on their own. So when you're selling, it's not about being a fast-talking salesman anymore. It's about being someone who can help, someone who can collaborate. There's a sales process, okay? And in picking that sales process, you need to have the right person. You need to be able to select the right person to take you forward. That person needs to be results driven, which means you have to be able to give him an incentive to do his job. If it means giving away 10% of every deal, then you need to give him 10% of every deal. And what does that mean if he's making more money than you at the end of the year? That means he's doing his job right. As the CEO of an early stage startup company, you should be paying people more than you're making yourself. Because you've got equity. This is your baby. Incentivize them to do their job. Let them feel good about what they're doing. Don't try to be Israeli and be cheap and be smarter than the other guy. Doesn't work. Because sales guys, if they're good, they're going to go someplace else. They know their worth. A good salesperson can self-manage themselves. You don't need to sit on top of them. If you need to sit on top of them, it's not the right person. You want a guy who's got enough incentive and who's got enough ego and enough balls that they're going to run and they're going to do the job because they're making money and they're happy about the money they're making. If they're not happy about the money they're making, they're not going to work hard. They're going to be spending time looking for another opportunity. That's not what you want. The ego is important because if they don't have an ego, every time they get a door slammed in their face, they're going to turn and walk away. When you see all the TV shows or all the movies, who are the guys in the bar who are picking up on the girls? Salesperson. Why don't they have engineers hitting on the girls?
They go to those benefits.
Because there's a difference in terms of risk appetite. Engineers like to know things are as they are. They like concrete things that they can work with, that they can feel. A sales guy, he might just fly by the seat of his pants. And if he crashes and burns, it's okay. Because there's another one step away. This is a different mentality. This is a different creature. You need to treat them as such. And you need to understand that. They've got to be persistent. If they give up and they don't keep making calls, you don't get results. So if they hear no, and they take no as an answer, not so good. They need to be able to listen. They need to be able to ask questions. If they're not asking questions of the customers and they're not getting feedback, they're not going to know what to tell you is wrong with your product. Can anyone repeat what I just said? Somebody? Somebody listening? Not very good salespeople. They're not going to be able to tell you what's wrong with your product because you're going to have problems with your product. There's going to be information they're going to bring back to you and they're going to tell you. And if they're telling you these things, you need to listen to them because they're talking to the customers. And if you're not listening to them, then you're not fulfilling the customer's needs. And if you're not fulfilling your customer's needs, you don't have a product. We're now going to talk about how we make sure this process is efficient and saves time and saves money. You know who this guy is?
Unfortunately, we cannot see.
Yeah, we can
Mr. Bean.
It's Mr. Bean. Thank you. Okay? Mr. Bean. Would you hire Mr. Bean as a salesperson? Yes?
Depends on
I haven't done a very good job.
No.
I would not hire Mr. Bean as a salesperson. I would not hire someone who would try to explain things in such a manner, because this is the retro tabulator again. Okay? Somebody who's talking and giving all these different diagrams. And no, that's not what we're talking about. Okay? When you're doing cold calling, most people pick up the phone, they make one call, they get a no, and that's it. Game ends. Sometimes you don't even get the no. You just make the call, nobody answers. They hang up the phone, they don't make another call. I have an entire sales team. And my sales team knows if they didn't make between 7 and 10 calls to the same person, I don't want to hear about it. It's not a no until they've actually gone through and tried absolutely every avenue. And if they didn't get to the first person, they get to another person. Get somebody on the phone. Talk to someone before you send an email.
I hate you.
Yes, you do. And it's okay. I don't have a problem. I will get you on the phone, I will find out what you need, I will listen, and I will give you a solution that answers what you need. That's my job. And if I can't get to you, I'll get to somebody else who works with you. And I'll find out from him what you need. But I will find out, because that's the way sales gets done. What's the best time to make contact with people?
Lunch.
Lunch? That's one time. That's a time during the day, that's not the day of the week.
Okay, the way home or on the way to work?
During
the way home or on the way?
On the way home or on the way to work. You're 100% right. Let's all get into the next slide because we're a step ahead of them. Monday mornings are the worst time to make sales calls, period. Okay? Don't do it. Okay? If you need to have meetings with your marketing and sales team, do it Monday morning, US time. Okay? Because you're not going to get through to anybody. Okay? Nobody has time for you anyways. You see, to have somebody doing sale calls for customers, directly to consumers, unless you've got a really expensive product, it's probably not a good idea. There's a cost to sales. Okay? Now, if you're talking about your first 10 products, that's okay, get on the phone call. But in terms of scale, in terms of actually going forward, you probably don't want to be calling consumers unless it's something that costs $1,000 or more. Okay? Maybe $500 is enough. It depends on how fast the sale process is and how easy it is to close a sale. But I wouldn't suggest for a high-tech company to do it. I don't think it works. Would you agree?
Yeah, but also there are similar benchmarks, like if you're using social networks to get your product out there, then there are similar benchmarks on, you know, what time of the day, what day of the week, etc. So very similar.
What about emails and Facebook? Is that the same?
I think I'll get to that in a second, but I think that when you're talking about emails, what I said earlier was, don't just send out emails blank, okay, unless you're doing an email campaign. And that comes much later on in the process. What we're talking about now is getting a beta customer, and we're talking about getting your initial customers. For those initial customers, you shouldn't be blasting people with emails. You should be targeting individuals within a corporation that you think are the right people to contact. You need to get them on the phone first. They're going to tell you, send me information. But at least now when they get the information, they're going to have some idea what you're talking about. If you're just sending them the email blank, it's unsolicited. Delete. That took 1 second of my time. I saved time today. In terms of the time of the day, so as you said, in the morning, before people get into the office, on their way to the office, that's the best time to get them. Or if they came to the office early, you get them on the phone, easy to talk to. At the end of the day, everyone on my team knows from 5 to 7 p.m., I don't want to hear from them. I want them on the phone. I want them talking to people. I want to know that they are getting in touch with people. And many times I say, oh, can we go a little earlier today? No. Okay? Because that's the time when you need to be talking to people. That's the time when you're most likely to have success. And for the new guys, it's a little difficult. For the guys that are already in it and know it, they understand if they stay now, they make their quota, they make their bonus at the end of the month. They're happy to stay the extra hours. They might take long lunch breaks. They might disappear in the middle of the day. I don't have such a problem with that, because at the end of the day, a sales guy is not judged by how many hours he sits in the office. He's judged by what are the numbers that he brings home. What are the deals that come in the door? And as long as he's hitting those numbers, hey, that's what a sales guy's for. Get them while they're hot. You get a lead that comes in, ideally, you're going to respond to that lead in minutes today. That lead comes in through social media, through a chat, through an email, or anything else, somebody's got to be on it. Don't get back to that person 3 days later. This isn't the 1980s. Okay? People want a response now. If they don't hear from you, they're going to go to your customer. It's one click away. Real easy. Persistence. Keep trying. Keep trying. Keep trying. I can't stress this enough. They're going to tell you no. No matter what, they're going to tell you no. Expect it. Just keep going. Don't take no for an answer. And if you get no for an answer, especially if you're going to pitch from a VC, ask them what you could do better next time. Ask them how you could improve. Most of the time after you've pitched, if you ask a VC for 15 minutes of their time to tell you what they did wrong or how they could improve, what would you tell them?
I would give them feedback. Actually, most of the time I give feedback, and not a lot of entrepreneurs are receptive to that. So
You should be listening to that feedback, because that feedback is what's telling you what you need to improve on. Was it your presentation? Was it your pitch? Was it your body odor? Okay, it could be a lot of different things. And if you're not paying attention, you're going to keep getting the door slammed in your face over and over. If you listen and you improve, you learn something, and that guy might be coming back to you when he hears about you from somebody else. Is it only inbound? No. It's not only about inbound. A lot of early stage stuff is about going out and approaching someone cold, someone you don't know about. And that means making a list of your top 30 prospects, of the guys that you'd like to reach out to who could really become customers. And organize them in order of who would be the number one, and take it all the way down to the end. And when you start, don't start with number one, okay? Save him for the last. Sequoia should be the last VC you meet with, not the first. Kleiner Perkins, only after you've met with Sequoia. Because you don't want to screw up with those guys. So build a list of 30 names, the 30 guys that you want to start with. Start pitching at the bottom and see how things go as you move forward. If you've gone through the list and you haven't been able to get interest from at least 15, something's wrong with your pitch. Stop. Go back and find out what was wrong and improve on it. Make the changes. Don't keep going through the list blindly just because you want to get to the top. Out of the list of 30 meetings, you should set yourself a benchmark. Remember I said about measuring everything? You should be getting at least 10 meetings out of those 30 people that are on your list. If you've got 10 meetings, that's not too bad. That means that you've got an offering that's interesting. If you didn't get those 10 meetings, you really need to think about really hard what you did wrong in the pitch phase. How do you get to them? Well, today, thank God, privacy's dead. Now he really gets it. Okay? You need to have a pitch that when you give it, within 5 seconds, the guy says, that's interesting. I don't have time to talk to you now, but send me information. If you can't do it in 5 seconds, if you can't do it in just really, really quick, it's not going to go anywhere. In those 5 seconds, you need to be able to understand what they need and how you can give it to them. That's it. Nothing else. So let's say you went through and you got your 30 people. You've got LinkedIn, you've got all these tools. You're not in Israel, you're trying to get hold of somebody abroad. Try to find a referral first. Don't approach them cold. Try to find somebody who can introduce you. Does that mean you don't make cold calls and you don't make cold approaches? Absolutely not. But if you can improve your chances a little bit, try. Now in Israel, because of the way we're used to doing business, unfortunately, we rely on them. If I don't have Moshe to introduce me, I'm not going to go call him because me, I mean, who am I? Nobody knows who I am. Well, guess what? In the US, nobody knows anyone else. And so you can pick up the phone and you can actually call them and say, hey, here's what I have to offer you, and here's why. Here's the problem that I'm solving for you. And you know what? If that problem is painful enough for him, if you're selling aspirin, the guy's going to listen. And if you're selling vitamins, maybe not. Do your homework on the person before you call. Look at his profile. Understand a little bit about the type of person he is. I told you a few things about me earlier, right? Somebody want to make some guesses as to what type of person I am? Am I shy? Yes, no?
No. No.
Am I adventurous?
Yes.
Do you think you could have come to those conclusions by looking at my profile? Probably? Chances are, yeah. Okay? You can see the activities I'm involved in. You can see the profession that I've chosen. You can see the things that I've done. And you can get a pretty good understanding of who the person is. And you're going to need to match your abilities to them. If you're calling up somebody who you know is going to be shy and introverted, you probably don't want to come off the way I'm coming off right now. You want to come off a little bit more modest. You want to come off a little bit more reserved. You want to speak in a quieter tone. And you don't want to be quite so aggressive, because you're going to scare them off. And that's a really important lesson for Israelis to learn. Because as a salesperson, a lot of what you're doing is acting. You are presenting. And your idea is to connect with the person on the other side. You need to connect with your audience. So after you've found out as much as you can about those 30 people, now start making your approach to each one of them and see how it goes. And does this take time, effort, and energy away from your R&D and development? Absolutely. But you're the CEO, or I'm guessing you guys want to be the CEO. Okay? That's what you got to do. Because getting in the door and getting their attention is probably more important than the idea that you have in your head about what needs to be built. Because they're going to tell you something different. So what type of leads do you want? Do you want to do all the effort and energy that I just talked about in terms of making a cold call? Who says yes? Yeah, you got one person who's willing to take the risk. Do you like kite surfing? Motorcycles. Oh, see? Huh?
We know the younger guy.
Okay, see? He's got it. All right? Most people don't want to do cold calling. It's a lot of effort, it's a lot of work. And you know what? זה לוקח אור של פיל. All right, you have to have a really tough hide in order to do it. Warm leads. What are warm leads? That's the way Israelis do business. That means we get somebody to introduce us. We get somebody who shakes our hand, takes us in the door, and says, you know, this is my friend Moshe, and I think you might be interested in talking to him. Right? That's cool. That works. But it still takes more effort. What's the best thing that can happen to you? When they come to you. That's a hot lead. This guy understands that you might be relevant. That saves a lot of time, doesn't it? Saves a lot of money, too. That's what you should be focusing on trying to get. When you're putting together a sales team to do inside sales, you have to understand the process that you go through. The lead process needs to be handled by junior guys. Because if you have senior guys doing the qualification part, that's going to cost you a lot of money, and you're wasting a lot of skills on something that can be done by somebody else for cheaper. On my team, the way I build a sales team for my customers is I take 2 junior guys for every senior guy. And in some places, there might even be more than that. And the junior guy's job is just to qualify and make sure that the prospect is real. Find out what stage he's at. Get the right person on the phone. If they're doing outbound calls and they're reaching out to people, let them be the ones reaching out. Let them be the one doing the initial pitch, sending that initial email, setting up the meeting, so that the real sales guy, when he gets on the phone and he pitches, he's armed with all the information he needs to be really, really effective. And that's a good use of your time. The cost in Israel for a junior sales guy, a decent one, is going to be about 15K, 15,000 shekels a month. Now, there are guys out there who are doing it for less. I haven't found them to be that effective. But maybe somebody smarter than me, maybe somebody knows how to do it better than me. A good senior guy, okay, that's going to be about 25K a month. And that doesn't include bonuses.
It's not the company cost, it's the brutto salary.
That's the brutto. That's not even talking about the company cost. The company cost is higher. You need to add about another 30% to that. Okay? So it's expensive. Sales is expensive. And if you're not setting aside enough money for that, if you're putting all your money in R&D, you're doing it wrong.
About taking the juniors from India?
I'm not going to say no. It depends on what you're selling. I think initially, for your initial sales process, I think you need somebody who's going to be intelligent and who's going to reach in and bring you back information from your customers. You need somebody who's going to listen. If you're doing something that's really, really high throughput, and then maybe you can do some R&D. But initially, for your initial sales, getting that beta customer and stuff like that, I don't think so. Once you're ready to scale, in my experience, what I've seen other companies do, I've seen other companies use guys in India for inbound customer service and stuff like that. I haven't seen them use them for alcohol. So make sure your materials are good before you start a sales process. If you have good materials, it's going to save you time and money going through the sales process. I thought more people were going to be engineers here, so I created a little equation. Okay, when you're doing sales, it's about creating trust with the person on the other side of the table. They're not going to buy from you if they don't trust you. Are you going to give $100 to a guy you just met on the street? That means being reliable. That means being able to delight them, make them excited. If you're able to do those two things, there's a good chance they're going to buy from you. If you don't make them happy, and if they don't feel that you can actually deliver, they're not going to give you their money. You need to be able to prove whatever you're doing. Prove it. If you can prove it, he says yes. If you can't prove it, it's just numbers on a chalkboard. Jealousy. Okay? We get jealous about business. We don't necessarily want to steal our friends' girlfriends. We definitely want the other guy's money, right? Okay? This is just genetically the way we're built. Guys, okay, when we go and we start to do business, one of the things that you can use as a tool to get someone to move now, to create a sense of urgency, is jealousy. VCs, especially in Israel, will be very interested in investing in you once somebody else has already said yes. Then they get really excited, and they get really offended. Why? You didn't give me some more time. I meant to get back to you. Okay? I was just abroad. I was just overseas. You know. Sales, same thing. Okay? Why did Microsoft spend so much money to buy such a small piece of Facebook? Why?
Why to get Facebook jealous? Because Google didn't have it.
Because they didn't want Google to get it. Okay? Jealousy is a huge motivator. It's a huge motivator for people in the business community. You have to be careful how you use it, because if you use it wrong, it's going to backfire and it's going to bite you in the ass really hard. But you have to understand, you need to get other people to move. And you need to get other people to make a decision. And if they feel they're going to lose out, they're going to miss the opportunity, and if you can back it up with a credible threat, if they feel like that they're going to miss out, you see the picture that I showed you here? She sees that she's going to miss out. Okay? Now she's going to move. I wish you all lots of luck in closing your deals. And to make it easier for you here in Israel, how many of you guys have heard of the funded? Okay? Everyone who didn't raise your hand, when you leave here tonight, you're going to sign up for this site. This will save you countless hours, countless agony in terms of pitching to VCs. Because you'll get a better understanding of what other people, other entrepreneurs in the community think about the VCs that they're working with. In terms of the people on your list, if there's a VC that has under a 2 as their ranking, those are the first guys you want to call. Because you're not going to do business, you don't want to do business with them anyways. Okay? Go pitch to them. Get a note from them. The guys who have a 3 or above, these are the guys you need to take seriously. Don't go in their door until you're ready. Don't blow your chances. I help you sell. I help you market. I help you make money. I help make you rich. When you guys need me, this is how to contact me. Okay? I'll be here afterwards for anyone who has questions or would like to talk. Thank you.